Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Champions of Self podcast. I'm Ben Eden, your host, and today I'm happy to welcome our special guest, Lauren Winzar, all the way from Australia. How are you, Lauren?
Hi, Ben. I'm well. How are you?
Great. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you very much for having me here.
So, Lauren, let's get started by hearing a bit more about who you are and what you do.
No worries. Okay, so I am Lauren Winzar. I'm your decluttering and organizing coach. So what I do is help people process usually their physical surroundings, but instead of just going through the stuff, we work through the emotions behind them and help figure out how you got there in the first place.
So, I love that. You and I talking about that the other day, and that's why I invited you to the show, because I thought they correlated so well. So let's hear just an example that you have. Maybe somebody you've worked with that you were working with their physical items in their house or whatever it was, but also how it translated to the emotional decluttering.
Well, there's so many, because honestly, I really think that our external space, our clutter, is a manifestation of our internal, like the clutter in our minds. And so for pretty much everybody, there is that strong connection there. But something that I think really represents the profound change that you can make through dealing with your physical stuff. I have one client just over a year ago, I think. She had all of these little projects happening. She had so much stuff that she just couldn't deal with. Some of it had been sitting untouched for years, but she couldn't part with it. She felt really strongly about this. And as we worked through just the emotional side, we didn't actually touch physically anything for the first session. And as we dug a bit deeper, we came to things like some horrible bullying she'd had as a child. And that really she didn't want to do any of these projects. She had one particular project that she was so passionate about and had never had the courage to start. And through realizing this and finding that connection to that bullying from, honestly, it was like when she was 7 years old that she had held on to, she was able to start making moves towards this big passion project. And it was so much easier for her to say goodbye to the clutter that was holding her back. So that was a really beautiful moment for me, finding that little trick.
Yeah. So it sounds like quite an emotional experience for you to help somebody declutter their physical space. Is that right?
It certainly can be. Just yesterday, one of my clients cried several times, and sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but it's because we hold so much of our emotions in stuff. And I think that comes back to a lot of what you talk about, Ben, that we're often taught to hide those feelings or pretend they don't exist. So it's easier to literally bottle them up and put them in something else. And that's not a conscious choice. It's just something that happens. So you put those feelings for, a very old friend that you might not see anymore is in this one thing that you did together that you have this, memory of. And you feel that by letting go of that, you've forgone the friendship or something. Tiny little things. Every item you have, I promise you, has got some sort of random emotional connection to it.
Right. Did you know going into this that you'd experienced the emotional side?
I did, because that's actually why I came to it. I've had my own experiences with depression and anxiety, and both of those things sort of run rampant in my friendship circles and family. It's, it's almost like a plague in itself at the moment over the past couple of decades, really. And I knew that dealing with the physical stuff is what helped me get past some of the worst times in my life. And I could see how not dealing with those things has made the situations of some people very close to me much worse. So through helping them with their physical stuff, I could help them get past. Now, I'm not like an accredited counselor or anything. We literally just work with what I've seen in my experience and with other clients. But I knew going into it as a business that it was more emotion than stuff, and that's why I focus on the coaching side of things rather than the organizing and physically doing it. I like to do both, but to me it comes back to that mindset, and that's where I like to spend my time.
And tell us a bit more about how you got into the decluttering business or realm of things.
Yeah, sure. So I was always very interested in keeping things structured and pretty, and in a way it was sort of my way of controlling my world. That goes back to like my early childhood. That was just what I liked. And then as I got older, it became a bit harder to do that. I have 2 children now, but especially when I had my first child, I had quite severe postnatal depression. Dealing with my physical stuff was really much easier than trying to deal with what was happening up here. But then everything kind of came to a head when I helped my mother clear out her house. I was by myself. She got very sick and she had to move closer to our extended family, and I had to empty out her whole house. And that's quite a long story, so I won't give you too much detail, but the point of it was that it was exhausting for me to do that. And it occurred to me how exhausting it must have been for her to live without that control and without the ability to process that kind of thing emotionally. Because until she got sick, it was only an emotional struggle for her to deal with this sort of clutter. And once that house was like no longer my problem, I had brought some of her stuff back because I couldn't bear to part with it. So I then had way too much stuff in my house. And I also had this kind of weird like urge to keep going. So I kind of got stuck into the decluttering of my stuff again. And I went deeper than I've ever done. And I've cleared so many things. And I realized that it was almost an addiction for me to just clear this stuff, because it felt so good to not hold on to the stuff that I thought I needed. And from there, I kind of ran out of things to do at my place, and I started bugging friends and family. And eventually one particular friend that was benefiting a lot but wasn't actually quite ready to go deeper recommended me to a friend who was, and then it started to spiral from there. So it's been sort of a journey by accident. I didn't set out to do this, but it's just something I love doing, and I love seeing the change in people when they find a way to deal with those emotions.
Right. No, that's neat. That's a cool story.
Thank you.
So the reason I love this so much is because it puts a visual to the emotions, which is often hard to do. So thinking about me, I'm just going to pretend that you're coaching me for a second. I have in my house, I do Airbnb. I rent out all the house except for one room. So all the house is pretty darn clean, except for my room. So my question is it more having things that I don't need, or is it the idea of a messy room that is the idea of decluttering that you're talking about?
I think it's different for everyone. What do you think, Ben? Do you think that you have stuff that you don't need in that room?
Oh, I'm sure I do.
And I suppose when it comes down to the decision to declutter, for some people it's emotionally too hard and it's just overwhelming and don't know where to start. So that's one major option that could be why you're in that situation. The other choice might just be, you know what to do, you're totally fine doing it, you have no problem with the emotions, but you're just not starting. And of course, there is some emotions to the just not starting. We can say that we don't have time, but I think this year has taught us that most of us have a little more time available to us than we expect.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. I'm coaching you now, love. Do you think that you don't know where to start, or you just haven't prioritized that time to do it?
No, I haven't prioritized it. That's all.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think that truthfully, and they do. That is true, that they just haven't prioritized it. And that's where the benefit of getting someone to help you, because then you have that accountability. So whether that is a family or friend that you trust and that is supportive of you, or if it's somebody like a professional who can come in and guide you. If you're lucky enough to have really supportive friends and family, then that can be a really nice process. If those people aren't the kind of supportive that you need, it can be really detrimental and push you further back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm here.
Well, good. Those are the things that I hoped I would hear. So if I were to apply this to emotions, here's how I think about it. It can either be, yeah, my room is messy, or I have a lot of things that I don't really need. And it's either I don't have time for it, like you were saying, or it's not a priority. In other words, my brain says it's not that big of a deal. Or I do have an attachment to something, like maybe I'll need that someday. I have 2 little nightstands by my bed, which would make it look pretty nice if they were clean, right? And they'd stay clean for about a week, and then for a couple of weeks they are pretty messy, and then I just finally get fed up. I see that as a very good visual for many people and their emotions. Something happens in the day, they get back to the physical real quick. I pick up the mail. Okay, I bring it in my room and I open some stuff and say, okay, I need that, but I'll get to it later. So I sit on my nightstand. Then days go by and I'm always looking at it. It's always bugging me because I always got to get to it, right? And then finally, there probably comes a day where I look around the room and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's so messy. I have to do something about it. And I really think that is how people are with their emotions. One day they'll find these emotions are bothering me. I spend a lot of time in my room, a ton of time alone with my thoughts. And now they're telling me that they need to be addressed. Do you agree with any of that?
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I think a lot of people have the misconception, both of the physical space and of the emotions, like we're talking about, that if it's not perfect all the time, you're doing something wrong. And that's just not realistic. You can't have the Pinterest perfect bedroom or house. You can't have the perfectly zen mind all the time. It's just not human. So giving yourself a bit of grace and cutting yourself some slack to say, I am human. Like, honestly, right now, my bedroom is not perfect. I'm the professional here. My bedroom is not perfect. I woke up with a bit of a headache. I had some other things I'd rather do than tidy up, so I haven't made my bed yet. I know I will get to it, and I know the difference it makes in my room, my home, my sense of well-being and my mind when I do that. So it is a priority and I will do it. I think sometimes the problem comes when, instead of looking around and going, this is a bit of a dump, I need to deal with this, people go, this is a bit of a dump, so why bother?
Yeah.
And you throw next week's mail on top of that pile. And then the week after that, and the week after that, and eventually something will happen. You go, well, no, I got that letter. It's in there somewhere. But you've got so much to dig through, and maybe that bill is now late or whatever it is. And it could have been a really simple process if you'd done it, well, on the day would be great. But even if you took 2 or 3 weeks to deal with it, that's still human. That's completely human. But it's knowing where your line is, where your threshold is, and being able to process that in a healthy way, rather than deciding it's too hard and giving up and waiting for everything to come crumbling around you before you deal with that one thing. And I think that's very, very true of what's going on in our minds as well. We can push things down, we can hide things, we can pretend it's not a problem. Sooner or later, it's a major problem. And I think that that's when it's really important to know when to ask for help.
There you go. Oh, you're saying so many good things. And I like how you brought up the fact that, yeah, we're not going to have a pristine room every day. It's not even required. So we shouldn't feel bad if it's not, right? Even you and I, who are talking about trying to teach people this, we both have a messy room right now.
And I'm sure there's stuff going on in our minds that we can deal with as well. Like, we're just human. It's just a way of knowing how to, it's knowing when to ask for help, and it's knowing how to process the things that you can control, that you can
100%.
help.
That's awesome. So again, to help the listeners maybe put some steps in their mind, or say, okay, if I can't have a perfect room, but I don't want to wait 4, 5, 7 weeks to clean my room, what's the good balance?
I think a good balance is, firstly, trying to set up some little habits. And those little habits can be, honestly, as tiny as I'm going to make the bed, or I'm going to put my shoes in this spot instead of leaving them around the house. And like, that's a big one for me. I take my shoes off at the front door and my mind still just leaves them there. So that is a conscious habit that I'm still always building, that there's these little things that make a difference. I find often when I'm helping teenagers and young adults, they still sort of live in their room. Even if they don't live like at home with their parents, they live in their bedroom. And sounds like you have a similar situation because of your Airbnb setup. But that often means that there's, you know, plates, food wrappers, drink bottles in the bedroom. So a good habit for people in that situation, especially young people, it seems to be more prominent in young people, just have a habit of, or start a habit before you leave your room, you grab a handful of stuff that belongs elsewhere. So take the rubbish. A tip that I remember hearing, you know, when I was a teenager was never leave a room empty-handed. And if you remember to never leave a room empty-handed, you will always be taking something and to put it back where it belongs. So for me, I've got my coffee cup with me at the moment. We're recording from my bedroom because COVID means my husband's got the office space. And so when I leave, I need to take my coffee cup with me because otherwise things build up and you'll end up with, you know, 5 or 6, and you can't carry 5 or 6 coffee cups at once. So why bother taking one, you know?
There you go.
Do the little bits.
I love those. So how would you translate exactly what you just said to the emotional declutter?
Okay, so with an emotional declutter, I like to think of, because I do work so much with the tangible stuff, trying to think of your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings as physical objects. So if you notice that you've got a particular thought that keeps bubbling up that's bothering you, because that's what the clutter is. It's the stuff that's bothering us and standing in our way. So you've got a particular thought that's bothering you. Maybe, okay, let's say, for example, you don't like answering your phone. That's actually a weirdly common hang up. Again, especially in young people, even myself, and I'm much older than your most of your followers, I think, but we're so used to texting and at most emailing that the phone actually ringing can be quite anxiety inducing. So say your phone rings and you don't recognize the number and you feel a little bit panicky and you don't know what to do. So you stop and you just ignore it. But that phone number rings you a couple of times, or some random unknown numbers are calling you every day, a couple of times a day. You notice that this thought is going, I can't answer that. I can't answer that. Firstly, you want to hold on to that object. So hold on to this thought and think, what is it about this that is bothering me? So try to unpack and figure out what that feeling is. If you really don't know, if there's no logical explanation for that, then just do the thing. So I might have, like, for example, if we went back to the coffee cups, if you have 5 there and you decide not to bother with any of them, you're just going to keep adding to that pile, right? If that phone rings and you don't answer the call, you've got a missed call and you feel anxious about that because you don't know what, like, you can't possibly know what's going on until you answer that call. And then you miss another call and another call and another call, and they pile up. And now it's really scary because it's out of hand. It's not just returning one call now, there's all of these calls. If you just start with one, because you can't take all the coffee cups back at once, you can't answer all the phone calls at once, but you can do one. So the next time that phone rings, take a deep breath and answer it, because what's the worst that can happen? Don't worry about the 20 you've missed before that. Don't worry about the 20 that might come after it. Just deal with the one that's right in front of you right now. And once you get through that part, you can feel good about yourself. You've accomplished that one thing that was super scary for you, and move on to the next one. And it might be scary every time the phone rings for a while, but the more you do it, the easier that's going to be. Now, that might sound kind of patronizing, saying you can't answer a phone call, but I know, I've seen it. And even myself, if I get a phone call of a number I don't know, I sort of go, what's that about? And I'm not prepared for that. I can't deal with that right now. But I know that if I do answer it, I don't have to think about it anymore. I might have to answer a question. I might have to say, sorry, wrong number. But either way, that problem is gone now.
Right.
Because nobody is expecting me to call them back.
Right.
And so I think that kind of thing can be true, especially for anxiety. Any of those little anxieties that we have, you can think about them, find the logic, and if there is a real reason for it to be bothering you, all emotions are real and they're all good reasons, but if there's a danger, like a legitimate danger, you can ask for help with that. If you're scared of answering the phone because you know that somebody wants something from you that you can't offer them, maybe you can write down for yourself how to respond to that, like how to say no, which is a really important thing in clearing your emotions, is learning to say no to things. Maybe you have trouble visiting a new place. By working out a bit of a script or having somebody who's been there before go with you are ways of dealing with a real or a perceived threat. If you don't have a proper reason, I say in inverted commas, then you just rip off the Band-Aid. So just deal with one little thing at a time until it's not a big scary problem anymore.
Right.
Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, absolutely. This is some very valuable and practical advice. And like I said earlier, this is so valuable because it's visual, right? We don't have to think of the theoretical, what does sadness look like, right? It's imagine a phone, imagine what comes with the phone, the thoughts that we all have. Even you're surprised that this idea exists of people being afraid of taking a phone call. And I didn't know that was a thing until about a year ago. And talking to some people my age who are in the young adults, they said, I'm just really uncomfortable taking an actual phone call, but I can answer your text. At first I was like, wait, what? But it's valid for a lot of people. So what you were saying, and I love how the brain has two sections, right? You have the emotional side and you have the logical side. The emotions exist and they all try to tell us something, but it doesn't. And some people, that emotional side is so powerful and so misunderstood that it overpowers the logical side. But what you're saying strengthens the logical side so that we say, hey, emotions, you're valid. I'm not going to try to hide you. I'm not going to try to invalidate you. But okay, now I understand what you're trying to tell me. But the logical side says, hey, maybe that fear isn't real. Maybe I can do a little step. Maybe I can do something. So I'm validating, but I still have power over what's going on. Yeah,
absolutely. And to be a whole and complete person, we need to acknowledge both sides of that brain. Because without the emotion, that's just a computer, right?
Right.
And without the logic, we're just a big fluffy puddle of goop. There's nothing driving us forward without that logic to structure the passion and the emotion.
I love that. Now you gave such a good example. Let's finish with one more. I'd like to hear about your story of an emotional pain that you overcame. And I don't know if it's connected to a physical object that you could teach us with again, or maybe you can merge in another example of somebody you work with, but I'd love to hear about your story.
So what I'd like to share, there isn't so much a physical object that was connected to this for me, but the strong emotions I can still feel when I make some decisions about physical objects. There was a person in my life that was very important. It was a family member, and my relationship with this person had become so toxic that it was draining every emotion in me. It was affecting my other relationships. It was affecting the choices I made in life. And it was probably the hardest decision I ever had to make, but it was also the best thing I could have ever done for myself. And it is still my most rewarding decision that I had to cut this person out of my life. And that is extreme. And I don't recommend it to people who have just had a little bit of a spat with a friend or a family member. But I reached a point where I sat down with this person. We'd had our ebbs and flows for years, and they were asking me to sort of bring them back into my world. and be a part of my life again. And I said to them, and I had thought this out for a long time and sort of weighed up all of the feelings. Like this was essentially making a big decision about like my we could assume that it's a favorite object, like something really, really important to you, but it's just not working anymore. It's just not serving that purpose anymore, and it's actually hurting. So I don't know, maybe say it's a pair of shoes.
Sure.
It's a pair of shoes that you love. It could have been the shoes that you wore to your prom. You guys have proms, right? We have formals.
Yep,
So it could be the shoes you wore to your formal that you want to have, that you have these beautiful memories with, and you want to keep them, but they really hurt and you can't wear them anymore. And every time you look at them, they make you feel sad that you can't wear them anymore. So I had this, but you know, to the nth degree with this person. And when they were they were asking me back, and they were sort of putting so much emotion to it, and there were tears on both sides. And I took a deep breath and I really thought it through. And I said, I love you. I love you so much. And I really appreciate everything that you've done for me and everything we've been. But I don't like the person I am when you're in my life. And I thought that maybe one day I might regret saying that, but many things have happened that could have changed how I felt, and they've only cemented that feeling that this toxicity was so harmful to me that it had changed who I was as a person. And by taking that out, I was now able to do the things that I wanted to do and how I wanted to do them. This wasn't a romantic relationship. It was on the family side of things. And it was hard. And I know that if I had been shown that when I was much younger, then maybe it wouldn't have got to that point. Maybe things might have been a little bit different. And I might have learnt to sort of distance myself without having to delete to cut that cord entirely. But when it gets to that point, I think it's really important to make the decision that's best for you. And I hope that, I know I've spoken to a lot of people about that. And I think for some people, it sort of is a word of warning that they want to work on things before it reaches a point where they feel they have no choice. And for others, it's permission that you can actually do okay without the people you're told you must have in your life. So that's why I wanted to share that, because I would have really loved to have that warning and or permission about 10 years before that happened.
Yeah. No, that's huge. I mean, that's so good that I'm probably not even going to unpack that story. Good job. All right. To wrap up, Lauren, is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we hear how people can connect with you?
I think that's probably enough of a mind squash. Like, I think we've plowed a whole lot of information into people's heads at the moment. So I'll leave that for now, but I think there's always a bit more to discuss in this kind of topic. So
yeah. So on that subject, if somebody does want to learn a bit more, how can they connect with you on social media?
So the easiest way is to search my name, Lauren Winzar, and I'm Winzar, just to be different. Search that. You'll find me on Facebook and on Instagram. And on Facebook, I'm often posting videos and challenges and new ideas and stuff to help you work through that. And you can learn a bit more about me and what I do there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining today. And everybody listening, thank you again for listening to another episode of the Champions of Self podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, know that when a podcast is highly rated, then more people can find it. So if you enjoyed it, or if you think somebody else could enjoy it, I'd really appreciate if you go in and leave a 5-star review so others can be blessed by the knowledge that we received today. Beyond that, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Ben.